The flashes of cameras painted the marble lobby of the Cipriani Wall Street venue in pulses of white and gold that night. It was one of those evenings where fame and philanthropy collided under chandeliers. An event meant to celebrate compassion, resilience, and human connection. But for those watching from the audience and later from millions of screens around the world, one unscripted gesture would become the only thing people would remember. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Prince Harry, standing just slightly behind Meghan Markle as she addressed the crowd, tilted his head ever so slightly, blinked, and rolled his eyes. It lasted less than 2 seconds, but in the digital age, that's all it takes for a storm to ignite. The Project Healthy Minds World Mental Health Day Gala of 2025 was meant to be a redemption moment, a reaffirmation of the Sussexes' mission to advocate for emotional well-being, to rebuild public goodwill, and to project unity after months of speculation about growing tension between them. The pair had arrived earlier that evening with their signature grace. Meghan in a sleek, off-the-shoulder emerald gown that captured every flash of the cameras. Harry in a sharp black tuxedo, tailored to royal perfection. The air outside was thick with New York humidity and anticipation, as photographers jostled to get the perfect shot. It was supposed to be their night, an evening to remind the world that their departure from the royal family had purpose, that their humanitarian work wasn't just performance, but passion. Inside the hall, however, the mood was different. The applause, though loud, carried a note of restraint, polite but not euphoric. The couple took their seats near the front row, side by side, but observers noticed how Harry kept adjusting his cufflinks, avoiding eye contact for much of the opening speeches. Meghan, conversely, seemed radiant, leaning forward, smiling as the host spoke about their courage to use their global platform for mental health awareness. The camera panned to them several times. Each time she nodded gracefully. Each time he seemed distant, expression guarded. By the time their names were called to accept the Humanitarians of the Year award, the energy in the room shifted. The crowd rose in applause, though the sound felt more dutiful than spontaneous. Meghan stood first, gently touching Harry's arm, coaxing him to rise. He followed, his smile polite but thin. Together, they ascended the stage, the bright spotlight casting long, deliberate shadows across the polished floor. The host handed them the Crystal Award, engraved with their names, and the applause subsided as Meghan stepped forward to speak. The audience expected charm and composure, and for the first few minutes, she delivered both. Meghan's tone was soft but assured as she thanked the organization, the sponsors, and their supporters around the world. But somewhere between her third and fourth paragraph, when she began recounting their personal struggles, her voice dipping into emotional territory, Harry's demeanor shifted. He adjusted his collar, looked down briefly, then up again. His jaw tensed. The camera, mounted to his left, captured the fleeting eye roll that would, within hours, eclipse everything else about the evening. That subtle flick of expression, a blend of fatigue, disbelief, and maybe even frustration, instantly became the internet's obsession. Every gesture, every glance, every half-smile between the couple had been dissected before, but this was different. This wasn't speculation based on rumors or sources. This was video evidence, tangible, undeniable, and recorded in high definition for the world to replay endlessly. The footage spread like wildfire. News outlets clipped it, social media users looped it, and body language experts were called onto morning talk shows to decode it. What had started as a celebration of humanitarian efforts transformed overnight into a global conversation about what one eye roll really meant. But to truly understand why that moment struck such a chord, one must step back and examine the context surrounding it. The delicate balance of image and authenticity that has defined Harry and Meghan's post-royal lives. Since stepping back from their official royal duties in 2020, the couple has lived under a microscope more intense than ever. Every public appearance is both a statement and a test, a chance to reclaim their narrative or reinforce their critics' claims. The Project Healthy Minds Gala was strategically significant. It wasn't just another red carpet event. It was symbolic. Both Harry and Meghan have long tied their public identities to mental health advocacy. It was through this lens they sought legitimacy beyond palace walls. And yet, ironically, it was in this very setting, a celebration of emotional openness, that the smallest trace of emotional dissonance cracked the carefully curated facade. Observers in the hall that evening later described the atmosphere as slightly awkward. Though no one dared to say so on record, Meghan's speech, though heartfelt, drifted into familiar territory. Resilience, the importance of listening, and the courage to speak one's truth. To her supporters, it was inspirational. To her critics, it was self-referential. Harry, meanwhile, stood beside her with the fixed politeness of a man who has heard the same story too many times in too many rooms. His posture was straight, but his eyes seemed distant, scanning the audience instead of his wife. When she made a remark about the power of love to heal, his lips pressed together. When she thanked him for standing by me through everything, his eyes closed briefly, and then, in one near imperceptible moment, rolled upward before refocusing on the crowd. For those in attendance, the gesture might have passed unnoticed. But for millions online, it became a Rorschach test for the Sussexes' marriage. Some saw it as irritation, a sign that Harry's patience had finally worn thin. Others interpreted it as exhaustion, a man weary from endless public scrutiny. A smaller few argued it was playful, a private exchange misinterpreted through the lens of gossip. But regardless of interpretation, the damage was done. The clip detached from its original context, floating freely across Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, stripped of nuance, amplified by commentary. Headlines screamed, "Harry's eye roll speaks volumes," "Royal disdain on display," "Did he just mock Meghan on stage?" Behind the curtain, sources described tension. One attendee recounted how, as soon as they exited the stage, Meghan's expression tightened. She turned slightly toward him, whispering something as handlers guided them toward photographers. Harry, according to that same source, nodded once but didn't reply. Minutes later, the couple posed together with the award, smiles reset, posture impeccable. But the energy was off. Meghan leaned in closer. Harry leaned back slightly, hands clasped. For trained observers of public body language, it was a familiar dance. One partner performing connection, the other managing discomfort. The irony of it all could not be ignored. Here was a couple being honored for their advocacy of mental health and emotional transparency, yet caught in a moment of visible strain, an image that perfectly illustrated the contradiction between public persona and private fatigue. And perhaps that's why the footage resonated so deeply. It wasn't just about celebrity gossip. It touched something universal. The tension between authenticity and appearance, between what we project and what we feel. In Harry's fleeting gesture, millions saw something human, a crack in the glossy armor. The introduction of this story, therefore, isn't just about the eye roll itself. It's about what it represents in the ongoing saga of Harry and Meghan, the collision between image, expectation, and reality. Their journey from royal grandeur to independent advocacy has been paved with scrutiny. Every word, every outfit, every public statement is weighed, compared, and weaponized. And this gala, which should have been a straightforward celebration of their philanthropic work, instead became another chapter in the endless narrative of royal drama. As the night ended, the couple exited through the rear entrance to avoid a chaotic press line. The New York air outside had turned cooler, laced with the faint hum of traffic and the lingering buzz of social media notifications. Harry walked slightly ahead, his hand briefly touching the car door before pausing. Meghan, still smiling for the lingering lenses, took a deep breath, adjusting the award in her hand. In that quiet moment, caught by a single photographer who managed to slip past the security cordon, the contrast between their faces said everything. Her expression, poised, determined, perhaps defiant. His, drained, pensive, somewhere between duty and disillusionment. The car door closed. The cameras kept flashing. The headlines were already writing themselves. Inside the vehicle, no one knows what was said. But if one were to guess, it likely wasn't celebration. Because once again, a moment that was meant to unify their image had exposed the fissures beneath. The irony was poetic. a night devoted to mental health awareness undone by a gesture of silent exasperation. In the hours that followed, networks replayed the footage. Talk shows debated the meaning. Commentators dissected it as if analyzing an archaeological find. But for the audience tuning in across time zones, the appeal of the clip wasn't just its royal scandal, it was its familiarity. Everyone at some point has been in that position. Standing beside someone they care about, feeling unseen, unheard, or trapped in performance. Harry's eye roll wasn't merely an act of impatience. It was a flash of emotional honesty, captured against a backdrop of pageantry. And that's what makes this story so powerful. It isn't about mocking or blaming. It's about peeling back the layers of celebrity narrative to reveal the very human exhaustion beneath. As this video unfolds, we'll explore not just what happened in that moment, but why it mattered, how it ties into the couple's evolving relationship with fame, with each other, and with the ideals they claim to champion. Because in the end, the eye roll is less a scandal and more a symptom of pressure, of disconnection, and of the impossible demand to appear perfect in a world that thrives on imperfection. For now, though, one truth remains unshakable. In a room filled with applause and good intentions, one unguarded expression cut through the noise, reminding the world that even those who speak for emotional honesty can sometimes struggle to live it. The night was meant to celebrate their shared compassion. Instead, it revealed their shared humanity. In the weeks leading up to the Project Healthy Minds Gala, the Sussexes team was in overdrive. For Meghan, this event represented more than just another red carpet moment. It was her chance to reclaim control of the public narrative. The last year had been a tumultuous one. Their Netflix projects had cooled in popularity, their Spotify deal had quietly ended, and public sympathy was increasingly split between admiration and skepticism. But this gala, sponsored by one of the most influential mental health nonprofits in America, was the perfect opportunity to reposition themselves not as embattled celebrities, but as global advocates for emotional well-being. Preparations began quietly in late August 2025. Sources close to the couple's Montecito home spoke of strategy meetings that stretched late into the night. Meghan's team, publicists, stylists, image consultants, and brand strategists, worked with a singular goal: control the optics. Every detail mattered, from the choice of designer to the tone of her speech. The message had to be one of healing, compassion, and humility. The world needed to see them as a couple united by purpose, not fractured by ego. Harry, however, appeared less enthusiastic. While Meghan immersed herself in rehearsals and vision boards, he seemed distracted, even withdrawn. Friends noticed his growing frustration with what he called performance philanthropy, the pressure to constantly prove sincerity through spectacle. He still cared deeply about mental health causes, especially for veterans, but he preferred smaller-scale initiatives, ones that didn't require cameras or applause. The idea of receiving an award for being Humanitarians of the Year reportedly made him uneasy. "It feels like PR, not purpose," he confided to an associate weeks before the event. The tension between genuine advocacy and brand management had long haunted the couple. Since their departure from royal duties, every public gesture carried dual weight: personal conviction and commercial implication. For Meghan, public appearances were opportunities to reinforce her credibility and independence. For Harry, they often felt like emotional minefields. The more polished the message, the more artificial it seemed. Yet both understood that optics were survival. The gala organizers, too, had their motivations. Project Healthy Minds had grown rapidly in reputation, drawing partnerships with high-profile donors, Silicon Valley executives, and media figures. Inviting the Sussexes was a calculated decision. It guaranteed global coverage. Their attendance would amplify the event's reach and reinforce its mission to destigmatize mental health discussions. Behind closed doors, staff debated how to balance celebrity glitz with authenticity. Some worried that the couple's presence would overshadow the cause itself, while others saw it as a golden opportunity. In the end, media interest won out. The guest list expanded, the sponsorship packages multiplied, and the venue was upgraded to accommodate a surge of press inquiries. By early October, the media machine was in motion. Select outlets received exclusive teasers. Meghan and Harry were to be honored for their groundbreaking contributions to mental health awareness and social dialogue. The phrase "trailblazers of compassion" appeared in several press releases, echoing language approved by their communications team. Photographers began coordinating with event handlers weeks in advance to ensure that the arrival shots would capture the right balance of glamour and seriousness. In Montecito, Meghan's preparations intensified. She commissioned a custom gown from a New York-based designer known for blending minimalism with symbolism, a rich emerald green representing renewal and balance. She wanted her appearance to communicate rebirth, a calm assertion of grace after a year of turbulence. Her speech, however, was where she poured most of her energy. According to insiders, she rewrote it multiple times, refining the rhythm, inserting personal anecdotes, and practicing her pauses in front of a mirror. She wanted emotion, but not sentimentality, humility, but not weakness. Every word must resonate, she reportedly told her speechwriter. Harry's role in the speech was less defined. At first, organizers assumed he would share the stage equally, each delivering part of the address. But Meghan insisted on taking the primary speaking slot, citing her passion for advocacy and communication. Harry agreed, outwardly supportive, though some close to him noted a subtle shift in mood. It wasn't jealousy, but discomfort, the feeling of being a secondary player in what was supposed to be a joint mission. As the date approached, tabloids began speculating about their appearance. Some predicted it would mark a major comeback. Others hinted at underlying strain. The British press, in particular, seized the opportunity to reignite old narratives. "Will Harry finally step out of Meghan's shadow?" blared one headline. American media framed it differently, focusing on the glamour and star power. The duality of coverage reflected the couple's complicated global image, beloved and criticized, admired and doubted, often in the same breath. 2 days before the gala, the couple landed in New York. The city greeted them with its usual mixture of fascination and fatigue. Paparazzi stationed outside their hotel captured every entrance and exit. Meghan waved and smiled, ever poised. Harry, behind dark sunglasses, kept his distance. Inside, the hotel suite became a command center. Meghan's team reviewed lighting cues, stage positions, and camera angles with event producers. Every seat in the gala hall had been mapped to anticipate the most flattering camera shots. The hours before the event revealed the growing contrast between them. Meghan's energy was high, focused, almost electric. She rehearsed lines aloud, tested microphone posture, and reminded her team of subtle cues. "When I mention the word healing, slow the light fade by 2 seconds, she instructed one producer. Harry, meanwhile, sat quietly by the window, scrolling through notes on his phone. His team had briefed him on key donors and speakers, but he seemed detached. One aide described him as present, but elsewhere. That morning, a small incident hinted at the storm to come. During a soundcheck, Meghan corrected a technician over her microphone height, insisting it should align with camera-level symmetry. Harry, standing nearby, sighed audibly and muttered something under his breath. Meghan turned briefly, eyebrows raised, then went back to her notes. To an outsider, it was a harmless exchange. To those who had worked with them long enough, it was a telltale sign. Tension, contained but simmering. The couple's arrival at the venue that evening was choreographed to perfection. The black SUV convoy pulled up precisely at 6:47 p.m., escorted by NYPD detail and private security. The red carpet was lined with reporters, their questions blending into a chaotic hum. "Over here, Meghan. Harry, how does it feel to be honored tonight?" The couple posed together, their hands briefly touching, smiles synchronized for the cameras. But in high-definition photos, analysts later noted micro-expressions. Harry's jawline tense, Meghan's eyes darting to ensure his smile held long enough for the flash. Inside the venue, the atmosphere sparkled with orchestrated elegance. Guests mingled under chandeliers, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries. Conversations revolved around wellness, mindfulness, and philanthropy, but the presence of the Sussexes dominated every whisper. Meghan glided between tables with practiced ease, greeting familiar faces and offering warm hugs. Harry followed, polite but distant, engaging in brief small talk before retreating to quiet corners. Observers noted his preference for speaking with veterans and NGO staff rather than socialites or corporate sponsors. When the host took the stage to open the ceremony, the couple sat together at the front table. Meghan leaned slightly forward, attentive, smiling. Harry rested back, his hand clasped on his knee, gaze alternating between the stage and the floor. Their tablemates, a mix of executives, advocates, and media figures, appeared delighted to share proximity with royalty. Cameras panned periodically, capturing their reactions. In those early moments, everything still appeared controlled, elegant, aligned. But beneath that calm surface, cracks widened. During a mid-event intermission, Harry reportedly excused himself from the table, citing a quick call. Meghan continued networking, greeting attendees and offering quotes to select journalists. When Harry returned, she was deep. The red carpet was more than a walk. It was a gauntlet. Every inch was flanked by reporters and flashing lenses. Questions flew like sparks. Meghan, what inspired tonight's look? Harry, how does it feel to be honored for your mental health work? Are you excited to be back in New York? Some questions reached them clearly. Others drowned in the sea of noise. Meghan responded to a few, her practiced smile unwavering. It's such an honor to be here tonight, she said to one outlet. Her voice smooth, melodic, media-trained yet warm. Harry, standing half a step behind her, gave a brief nod to another journalist but didn't elaborate. For seasoned observers, it was a familiar dynamic, the choreography of a couple balancing spotlight and shadow. Meghan took the lead, guiding the energy, shaping the narrative. Harry followed, supportive but subdued, his discomfort visible only to those who knew how to look for it. He had always disliked the performative nature of red carpets. To him, these weren't moments of glamour but arenas of judgment. Every flash felt like interrogation, every smile a defense mechanism. Yet, beside Meghan, he maintained the facade. Event photographers later described the atmosphere as unusually tense. They looked perfect for the camera, one said, but between poses you could feel the silence. Another recalled that Harry kept glancing toward the end of the carpet, as if mentally counting the seconds until it was over. Meanwhile, Meghan engaged fully, adjusting her posture subtly each time a different outlet's camera focused on her. She had learned over years of public exposure how to control her narrative through body language, how to project poise even when under pressure. As they made their way down the carpet, flashes illuminated the metallic sheen of Meghan's jewelry, a simple bracelet and a set of diamond earrings that caught the light with surgical precision. Her stylists had insisted on minimal accessories to avoid overpowering the message, yet the understated elegance only heightened her presence. Harry, in contrast, wore no visible embellishment, just a classic tuxedo and the faint expression of someone enduring rather than enjoying. The carpet itself was meticulously planned by the event's production team. Markers on the floor indicated where the couple should pause for photographs, ensuring optimal angles for media coverage. Behind the cameras, publicists gestured discreetly, signaling which direction to turn, when to pause, when to move. Meghan followed the cues seamlessly, nodding and smiling on beat. Harry lagged half a second behind, his timing slightly off. It wasn't noticeable to most viewers, but in the language of red carpets, such microseconds speak volumes. At one point, a reporter shouted a question that pierced through the noise. Harry, do you still miss being part of the royal family? The crowd hushed briefly, sensing potential drama. Meghan's smile flickered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered instantly. Harry, caught off guard, blinked once, then replied simply, "We're happy doing meaningful work." It was diplomatic, measured, and final. The reporter tried to push further, but security ushered the pair forward before the exchange could escalate. Behind the crowd barriers, fans and critics alike recorded every second on their phones. Within minutes, clips began circulating on social media, captioned with instant opinions. She looks stunning. He looks tired. Something feels off. The red carpet had barely ended, and the narrative had already begun spiraling into thousands of interpretations. Halfway down the carpet, the couple was guided toward a step-and-repeat wall bearing the Project Healthy Minds logo. This was the focal point for official press photos, the images that would define the evening across magazines and websites. Meghan positioned herself with practiced elegance, slightly angling her body toward Harry for symmetry. He adjusted his stance, hands loosely clasped in front of him, offering a faint smile. The photographers shouted commands. "Closer together! Look left! One more!" Meghan complied fluidly, shifting angles with precision. Harry followed each adjustment half a beat slower. At one point, Meghan reached for his hand. The gesture was subtle but caught by nearly every camera. Her fingers brushed his briefly. He hesitated, then reciprocated with a restrained grip. The resulting photo looked intimate, even tender. But seconds later, when the flashes ceased, he released her hand almost imperceptibly. Observers might have missed it, but in high-resolution stills, the micro-expression on his face told a quieter story. Relief mixed with fatigue. Inside the press area, their team monitored live feeds on tablets, ensuring the images being released captured the right tone. "Keep the smiles," one publicist whispered. "Avoid any frame where he looks down." Every second was curated, every image filtered through an invisible algorithm of optics and reputation management. As the final stretch of the carpet approached, a group of young advocates from the organization greeted the couple. Meghan knelt briefly to speak with one of them, a teenage girl who had shared her story of depression and recovery in the organization's campaign film. It was a genuine moment of connection, one that reflected Meghan's strongest asset: empathy in action. Her voice softened as she thanked the girl for her courage, placing a hand on her shoulder. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing the perfect humanitarian tableau. Harry stood nearby, smiling faintly but distant. He seemed protective yet peripheral, the background figure in a narrative centered on her. When the girl turned to shake his hand, he crouched slightly, offering kind words of encouragement. The sincerity in his tone was unmistakable. But as soon as they stood again, the handlers ushered them toward the entrance. The brief window of authenticity closed, replaced once more by the polished rhythm of performance. The walk into the building marked the end of the public portion of the evening, but the red carpet had already set the emotional tone. For Meghan, it was a triumph of control. Another flawless appearance reinforcing her mastery of public engagement. For Harry, it was endurance, a polite act of cooperation under the weight of expectation. The difference wasn't hostility but perspective. She saw it as a platform, he saw it as exposure. Later that night, photographers reviewed their shots in hotel rooms across Manhattan. Most agreed the couple looked impeccable, but something intangible hung in the images. "There's distance," one editor noted. "They're together, but they're not." The best photos were selected and distributed within hours. By midnight, glossy images of the Sussexes flooded the internet. Her elegance praised, his solemnity questioned. Meanwhile, social media commentators dissected the footage in real time. Some hailed them as icons of perseverance. Others fixated on body language. "Look how he stands slightly behind her," one post read. "He's supporting her or he's disappearing. It depends on how you look at it." That ambiguity was exactly what kept people talking. The red carpet, though lasting barely 10 minutes, had set the stage for everything that followed. It was a dance between authenticity and control, affection and fatigue, light and shadow. In that short walk, all the elements that defined their public relationship were visible. Her confidence, his restraint, their shared professionalism, and the undercurrent of emotional misalignment that no amount of rehearsal could conceal. As they finally stepped through the glass doors into the main hall, the sounds of the crowd faded behind them. Inside, the lighting softened, the cameras thinned, and the illusion of serenity returned. But the weight of that brief spectacle lingered. The red carpet had done its job. It had captured attention, sparked speculation, and established the mood. Yet it had also exposed the human cost of living life under perpetual scrutiny. For Harry, those few minutes would mark the start of a night that tested his composure more than any battlefield or interview ever had. For Meghan, it was the prelude to her defining speech, the one she had rehearsed countless times in pursuit of perfection. Neither could have known that before the evening ended, one small gesture, a flicker of frustration, a roll of the eyes, would erase all the perfection the red carpet had promised and remind the world that even the most polished performances have cracks waiting to be seen. When Meghan Markle stepped up to the microphone inside the Grand Cipriani ballroom, the air seemed to tighten. The crowd, buzzing with polite conversation moments before, sank into an expectant hush. The echo of her heels against the marble floor faded as she reached the podium, her hand grazing its polished surface like a conductor about to cue a symphony. The lights adjusted automatically, dimming across the tables and intensifying around the stage. Every eye in the room, and every camera lens positioned strategically throughout the hall, focused squarely on her. Meghan had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Every syllable, every pause, every emotional inflection in her voice had been practiced and timed. Her speech was designed to move people, to inspire empathy while reasserting control over a narrative that had often escaped her. The audience saw a woman calm, poised, and deeply sincere. But behind that composure was calculation, and behind the calculation was fatigue. Her voice broke the silence, clear and deliberate. It's easy to look at a room like this, a room filled with compassion, success, and privilege, and believe that mental health is something we've already conquered. But the truth is, even in our brightest moments, we can all feel unseen, unheard, and undone. The audience responded with respectful applause. The rhythm of her delivery was flawless. Each sentence landed like a carefully placed stone, steady and symmetrical. The camera panned to Harry, who stood slightly behind and to her right. His face was neutral, unreadable. The lights cast a faint shimmer across his wedding band as his hands clasped in front of him. As Meghan continued, the cadence of her speech followed a familiar arc. Vulnerability, struggle, resilience, hope. She spoke of the importance of listening, of creating safe spaces for conversation. She mentioned the couple's work through Archwell, the foundation they had established, linking personal story with public service. Each word was deliberate, each transition measured. Yet, even as the audience nodded along, there was something else happening in the background, a shift in the subtle choreography of their body language. Harry's gaze wandered. At first, he looked at Meghan as she spoke, his expression composed. But gradually, his eyes began to drift, to the audience, the stage floor, the large screen projecting her image. To most, it would seem like harmless distraction, the fidgeting of a man accustomed to attention but unenthused by it. Yet for those who watched closely, the micro-movements told a deeper story. A restless mind, a restrained spirit. The speech turned more personal. When we talk about healing, Meghan said, her tone softening, we're not just talking about therapy or meditation or silence. We're talking about connection, about the courage to love, even when it feels impossible. Her hand moved instinctively toward Harry, gesturing in his direction without breaking rhythm. I've been lucky enough to have a partner who believes in that kind of love. A love that listens even when words fall short. It was a perfect moment on paper, tender, relatable, the kind of soundbite destined for viral circulation. But on stage, the reality was more complicated. The camera cut to Harry at the exact instant she looked toward him. For a split second, their eyes met. Then came the smallest flicker, the tightening of his jaw, the brief lowering of his eyelids, and that unmistakable upward roll of his eyes. It was barely perceptible in real time, just a second-long gesture that most in the audience missed. But the cameras didn't. The lenses zoomed, captured, froze. The expression was subtle but layered. Not open defiance, but an exhale of quiet disbelief. The reaction of a man caught between public decorum and private exhaustion. On social media, hours later, it would be replayed millions of times. Commentators would debate whether it was sarcasm, irritation, or just human fatigue. But in that moment, under the heavy lights, it was simply truth leaking through a polished surface. Unaware, or perhaps unbothered, Meghan continued. We all have moments when we question who we are, when we feel like our voice is drowned out by noise. But the beauty of healing, she said, pausing for effect, is that it's not a finish line, it's a journey. Applause rippled across the hall. She smiled, the kind of smile that photographs beautifully but doesn't quite reach the eyes. Harry joined in the clapping, his expression steady again, but the distance between them had already registered in the minds of several attendees. Some whispered discreetly at their tables, exchanging knowing looks. Others simply stared, transfixed by the paradox unfolding before them. A speech about connection delivered by two people who seemed, at that moment, profoundly disconnected. The rest of Meghan's speech unfolded with seamless professionalism. She spoke about childhood mental health, about digital toxicity, about resilience in the age of social media. Her tone was inclusive, her words polished, but to the cameras, it was clear that Harry's posture had stiffened. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, nodded occasionally, but his gaze seemed detached, his presence almost spectral beside her glow. For Meghan, this was a controlled narrative, her arena. She thrived on articulation, on crafting meaning through language. Her delivery was cinematic, moving between empathy and empowerment. She used personal anecdotes sparingly but effectively. When she mentioned her own experience of feeling isolated by expectation, the crowd responded audibly. She paused, looked down briefly as if regaining composure, then lifted her head with soft conviction. It was masterful performance, part authenticity, part precision. Yet even as the audience absorbed her words, Harry's stillness began to draw attention. His lack of reaction became its own kind of statement. When she said, "Our journey has taught us that love is listening," the cameras again caught his subtle swallow, the micro-tilt of his head, the brief tightening of his lips. It was as though the silence between them was louder than her speech. Among the crowd sat journalists and image consultants trained to read nuance. They noticed it immediately, the small pauses that weren't in sync, the way Meghan's hand gestures avoided brushing his arm after the first few minutes, the way he clapped half a beat late. None of it was overt, yet together it formed a pattern, a rhythm of dissonance. Behind the scenes, the production team exchanged glances. The live feed director gestured for camera 2 to hold on a wide shot, minimizing close-ups of Harry. But it was too late. The moment had already been caught by the secondary feed projected on the side screens. Someone in the control room muttered, "We've got a reaction." They didn't know it yet, but that reaction would become the story. When Meghan concluded, she closed with a line rehearsed dozens of times. "Every one of us has a story worth hearing, a voice worth saving, and a heart worth healing." The applause was immediate, louder now, perhaps more out of relief than resonance. People rose to their feet. Some clapped with genuine enthusiasm, others with the polite rhythm of social obligation. Harry stepped forward on cue, placing a hand on her back as she turned from the microphone. Their smiles returned for the cameras, a tableau of unity. The host rejoined them on stage to present the award, and photographers flooded the front rows to capture the shot. The flash from one camera reflected off the crystal plaque, casting a glare that temporarily masked the unease etched beneath their expressions. When the applause subsided, the couple posed briefly for a joint photo. Meghan's hand rested on Harry's arm. His gaze pointed slightly off camera. For a few seconds, their smiles synced again. But as they turned to leave the stage, she reached for his hand. He clasped it, but loosely, without the firm warmth that had once characterized their public affection. Backstage, the energy shifted instantly. Meghan's handlers moved efficiently, adjusting her gown, handing her a glass of water, congratulating her. Harry stepped aside, thanking a technician who held open the exit curtain. His face remained composed, but there was a quiet heaviness in his demeanor, the calm after an emotional storm. Someone from the event staff congratulated them. "That was wonderful, Your Highnesses," they said, forgetting the earlier instruction to avoid titles. Meghan smiled graciously, correcting softly, "Just Meghan and Harry, please." Harry nodded, his tone polite but clipped. As they exited the stage area, a crew member holding a camera whispered to another, "Did you see that eye roll?" The other nodded, half smiling. "Yeah, that's going to blow up online." They were right. Within an hour, clips from the live stream began circulating on social media. By midnight, the footage had been slowed down, zoomed in, analyzed frame by frame. Some claimed it was frustration. Others swore it was sarcasm. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag Harry's eye roll, hashtag Gala tension, hashtag Sussex's 2025. Comment sections filled with speculation, humor, and judgment. What had been a polished night of advocacy became a viral symbol of emotional fracture. Inside the couple's car later that evening, silence hung heavy. Meghan checked her phone, scanning messages from her team praising her delivery. Harry stared out the window, the city lights flickering across his reflection. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Meghan said quietly, "It went well." Harry nodded. "Yeah," he replied, though the words sounded more like resignation than agreement. The ride continued in stillness, both aware, perhaps unwillingly, that the night's defining moment wasn't her speech, but his reaction. The power of that moment, and its aftershock, wasn't about the gesture itself but what it revealed. The invisible gap between presentation and reality. It was a moment when authenticity slipped through the cracks of image control. And in that tiny gesture, that fleeting eye roll, the world saw something painfully human. The exhaustion of a man caught between love and performance, loyalty and truth. What began as a celebration of compassion and mental wellness had transformed into a tableau of emotional complexity. The cameras, in focusing on Meghan, had inadvertently captured what lay behind her, literally and metaphorically, the silent counterpoint to her. As the day unfolded, paparazzi camped outside the hotel, shouting questions whenever the couple appeared. "Harry, were you upset during the speech? Meghan, did you notice his reaction?" Their silence only fueled curiosity. Photos of them leaving the hotel later that day, Harry's expression stoic, Meghan's fixed smile, only deepened the narrative of tension. In London, royal commentators chimed in. Some argued that Harry's visible frustration was the inevitable consequence of his dislocation from the royal structure that once gave him purpose. Others claimed he had grown weary of being the supporting act to Meghan's spotlight. A former palace aide told one outlet, "Harry's always been emotional, but this kind of moment shows how thin the ice has become." And yet, beyond the noise, there was something undeniably human in it all. The eye roll wasn't rebellion, it was fatigue made visible. It was the culmination of months, perhaps years, of unspoken strain, the pressure to maintain a flawless image while constantly being measured against invisible standards. In that instant, the prince became not an icon, but a man who'd reached his threshold. Late that night, Harry reportedly called one of his old friends from the UK. "They're making a circus out of nothing," he said, half laughing. "It's ridiculous." The friend asked him if he was all right. After a pause, Harry answered, "Yeah, just tired of pretending all the time." That single statement, though private, reflected what millions sensed from that small moment on stage, the fatigue of a life lived in performance. It wasn't anger at Meghan, nor disdain for her message. It was the exhaustion of being perpetually watched, perpetually interpreted, perpetually misunderstood. The infamous eye roll would eventually fade from trending lists, replaced by newer scandals and fresher headlines. But it would linger in memory as one of those symbolic royal moments, the kind that becomes shorthand for emotional truth. Like Diana's downward glance at her engagement announcement, or William's distant stare at public events, it carried the weight of something unsaid. For Meghan, the aftermath was professionally manageable but personally unsettling. The gala had been meant to reinforce unity, but it had instead reignited speculation. For Harry, it was another reminder that sincerity is a liability in the public eye. His authenticity, unguarded, unscripted, had once again been weaponized. And yet, in the irony that only fame can produce, that same authenticity also reconnected him with the public. Many who watched the clip saw themselves in his expression. The frustration of expectation, the fatigue of performance, the quiet rebellion of a glance. That's what made the infamous eye roll so powerful. It wasn't a scandal, it was a mirror. It reflected the cost of visibility, the cracks in perfection, and the vulnerability that even royalty cannot escape. In those 2 seconds, Prince Harry reminded the world that beneath titles, speeches, and stage lights, he was just another human being, exhausted, conflicted, and searching for space to breathe. The morning after the gala, the world woke to a storm. Not of politics, not of tragedy, but of pixels. Prince Harry's eye roll, a flicker of expression barely lasting a breath, had detonated across the internet like a digital explosion. What had begun as a charity gala in New York was now global headline material. It wasn't the speech, the award, or the cause that people discussed, it was the look. The small, involuntary movement of Harry's eyes had outshone everything else. The internet is merciless when it finds a symbol. Overnight, millions of people became amateur analysts, assigning meaning, motive, and metaphor to that fleeting expression. The clip had been looped, slowed, memified, captioned, remixed, and debated in every digital corner. It spread beyond gossip channels, appearing on political pages, relationship podcasts, and even comedy shows. Harry's eye roll became shorthand for exhaustion, skepticism, or quiet rebellion depending on who was interpreting it. By dawn, the hashtags #Harry'sEyeRoll and #GalaMoment had accumulated over 100 million impressions. On TikTok alone, the clip appeared under thousands of edits. One with dramatic orchestral music, another with sarcastic commentary, another in slow motion with captions reading, "When you've had enough of pretending." The internet had turned a moment of silence into a chorus of judgment. For Meghan, the reaction was familiar but infuriating. She had spent years trying to reclaim her narrative, to shape perception through precision. Every word, every gesture meticulously designed to communicate poise and empathy. But none of that mattered now. All her control evaporated the moment the internet froze on Harry's expression. Inside their New York hotel suite, Meghan's media team convened in crisis mode. The large-screen television in the suite displayed the morning talk shows. Every network had replayed the clip. Some hosts mocked the reaction playfully. Others speculated on marital discord. The lower third of one segment read, "Royal eye roll sparks questions of tension." Meghan sat on the edge of the sofa, arms folded, watching in silence. Harry stood behind her, pacing slowly, a mug of coffee in hand. "It's ridiculous," he said finally. "People do this every day. Why is it news?" "Because it's you," one of the publicists replied carefully. "And because it fits a story they already believe." Meghan turned sharply, then changed the story. But that was the problem. You can't rewrite the internet. Once something becomes a meme, it's immortalized in public consciousness, stripped of its context and reassembled into whatever narrative the crowd desires. Harry's eye roll wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to the world. By mid-morning, media coverage had shifted from speculation to analysis. Twitter threads dissected every frame with forensic detail. "Notice the microtension in his jaw," one user wrote, attaching a zoomed-in screenshot. "Classic sign of emotional frustration." Another countered, "He's probably just tired of standing under bright lights. Stop overanalyzing." The debate spiraled into full cultural commentary. Influencers weighed in. Relationship experts posted think pieces. Podcasts recorded emergency episodes. One popular mental health advocate tweeted, "It's ironic that a couple promoting emotional wellness can't escape public judgment for showing emotion." The post went viral in its own right, spawning its own mini-discussion on authenticity and fame. The meme economy capitalized instantly. Within hours, brands began referencing the incident. A coffee company posted an ad reading, "Tired like Harry? Get your caffeine fix." A dating app joked, "When your partner gives Meghan-level speeches, but you're just not feeling it." The incident had transcended gossip. It had become cultural shorthand. Inside the couple's PR circle, the debate over how to respond intensified. Meghan's instinct was to control the narrative, to counter it with grace, to turn attention back to the cause. Harry's instinct was to ignore it entirely. If we say anything, we make it worse, he argued. They'll just twist it again. But silence looks like admission, Meghan replied. It always does. The discussion grew tense. Their communications director suggested issuing a short, neutral statement focusing on the charity's impact. The couple is proud to have supported Project Healthy Minds and thanks the public for continuing to engage with mental health advocacy. It was vague enough to redirect attention without addressing the controversy directly. Meghan approved it immediately. Harry didn't object, but his indifference was evident. The statement went out by midday. Predictably, it changed little. Commentators mocked it as royal deflection. News anchors read it with raised eyebrows. A nice sentiment, one said on air, but it doesn't exactly explain what was going on between them last night. Meanwhile, social media continued to dissect not just the eye roll but the entire body language of the evening. Amateur analysts spliced together footage of the couple from the red carpet, their seating at the table, even the few seconds after they exited the stage. Look how far apart they're walking. One TikTok caption read, "This is not body language of unity." Another video compared Meghan's confident gestures with Harry's restrained posture, overlaying dramatic music for effect. And yet, amid the flood of mockery and speculation, something else began to emerge, an undercurrent of empathy. Ordinary people saw in Harry's face a reflection of their own fatigue. Comments began to shift tone. "He looks overwhelmed. You can tell he's drained. He's just human." That was the paradox of virality. It destroyed privacy but humanized at the same time. The same audience that mocked him also related to him. In one moment, Harry had become both a target and a symbol. The British tabloids, however, remained unrelenting. They framed the moment as evidence of an implosion. The royal divide, Harry's disdain for Meghan exposed in New York, read one sensational headline. Others interviewed supposed insiders who claimed Harry felt overshadowed by Meghan's need for control. None of it was verified, but it didn't need to be. Sensation is its own truth in tabloid economy. By the afternoon, media outlets had begun to invite psychologists to comment on live broadcasts. "This reaction is very revealing," one said, pointing to the clip paused on screen. "You can see the micro-expression of resignation. It's not anger, it's depletion." Another expert disagreed, saying, "We mustn't project narratives onto an ambiguous expression." But the fact that we're even having this discussion shows how starved we are for authentic emotion from public figures. In Montecito, where the couple's team of advisors coordinated media strategy remotely, phones rang nonstop. Reporters requested statements. Producers offered interview slots. Every outlet wanted clarification. Meghan's chief advisor declined all offers. "We're not engaging in the circus," he said. But privately, even he admitted the situation was out of control. By evening, the conversation had reached saturation. Late-night comedians incorporated it into their monologues. One joked, "You know your marriage is public when an eye roll gets more coverage than a political summit." The audience laughed, and the clip circulated online, adding another layer of mockery. Meghan watched one of those clips on her phone that night, face expressionless. She had weathered worse storms, but this one felt different. Not because of the ridicule, but because it centered on Harry. Public perception had turned him from the protective husband into a symbol of discontent. And for the first time, she wasn't in control of the narrative at all. Harry, on the other hand, spent the evening away from the screens. He went for a walk outside, accompanied only by a discreet security officer. The city air was cool and damp, the kind that carries the faint smell of rain and exhaust. He pulled his cap lower over his eyes and kept his head down, avoiding attention. To him, the uproar felt absurd. "They make stories out of air," he muttered to himself, "and we're the ones who have to breathe it." Back online, debates intensified. The digital battlefield divided into factions. Team Meghan, Team Harry, Team Common Sense. Psychologists, fans, critics, comedians, and strangers all contributed to the noise. The comment sections were war zones of opinion. Empathy clashing with mockery, sincerity battling sarcasm. The line between public and private life disintegrated once again, and the couple became symbols of whatever emotional projection the audience needed them to be. Amid all of this, the original message of the gala, the focus on mental health, was lost. The very cause they had been honored for became collateral damage in the spectacle of scandal. Project Healthy Minds issued its own statement, thanking the Sussexes and emphasizing the importance of empathy in digital spaces. It was a subtle attempt to redirect the narrative back to compassion, but even that was co-opted by online sarcasm. Empathy, one user wrote under the post, starts with not rolling your eyes. The following day, analysts began tracking the engagement metrics. The viral clip had generated more social interaction than any of the couple's official projects in months. Their charity gained temporary visibility, but for the wrong reasons. The organization's donation portal crashed briefly under heavy traffic, an ironic twist in which scandal fueled philanthropy. In the end, what the internet saw as entertainment was, for the couple, a turning point. Meghan, for all her media savvy, realized how fragile control truly was. And Harry, for all his attempts to withdraw from royal performance, discovered that privacy is a myth once fame becomes your language. Late one night, days after the incident, he scrolled through social media anonymously. The memes were endless. His face turned into jokes, reaction GIFs, and commentary. Then he stumbled upon one post that froze him. It read simply, "He's not angry. He's tired. We all are." It had tens of thousands of likes. For the first time, he smiled faintly. At least someone had understood. The social media eruption eventually began to cool, but it left a crater. Trust within their team had frayed. Meghan was sharper in meetings, less tolerant of mistakes. Harry grew quieter, withdrawing further from publicity. And the world, ever hungry for the next spectacle, moved on, but not entirely, because that moment, replayed and reframed millions of times, had etched itself into digital memory. It was a reminder of how quickly sincerity could become spectacle, how emotion could be extracted, commodified, and sold back as entertainment. When history looks back at the 2025 Project Healthy Minds Gala, it won't remember the award or the speeches or even the message. It will remember the look, the glance that became a story, the story that became a storm, and the storm that revealed just how fragile human authenticity is in the machinery of modern fame. By the third day after the Project Healthy Minds Gala, the eye roll had evolved from gossip into analysis. What had started as a viral meme now entered a new phase, the expert dissection era. The tabloids had exhausted speculation, social media had burned through humor, and now it was time for the self-proclaimed professionals. Behavioral analysts, psychologists, communication consultants, and body language specialists. Every network wanted one. Every article needed a quote. Television segments opened with slow-motion replays of the moment in question. The hosts, smiling knowingly, turned to their studio guests, the experts, whose credentials ranged from decades of research to viral TikTok fame. The footage looped again. Meghan speaking, Harry blinking, the eye roll, the faint breath, the shift in weight. And then came the breakdown. "Let's freeze it right there," said Dr. Catherine Llewellyn, a behavioral psychologist featured on a popular morning show. "If you look closely, his shoulders drop just before the eye movement. That's a clear sign of internal exasperation, likely frustration being suppressed." The host nodded theatrically, as if witnessing the unraveling of a state secret. "But could it just be tiredness?" the co-host asked. Dr. Llewellyn smiled. "In theory, yes, but remember, these are trained public figures. They know they're being watched at every moment. Unconscious gestures like that often leak emotional truth." Across the ocean, in London, British news programs held their own panels. One network invited 3 royal commentators and a body language consultant to discuss the clip. "It's unmistakable," said one commentator. "That's not fatigue. That's irritation. The man looks like he's barely holding it together." Another countered, "He's been under immense pressure. Maybe he's just overwhelmed." The body language consultant, a former police profiler named Michael Doran, cut in confidently. Eye-rolling is one of the most universal gestures of contempt. It's a nonverbal way of rejecting what's being said without speaking. Communicates disconnection. You'll see it in couples who've reached a point of frustration where they stop verbalizing their irritation. The clip played again in slow motion, magnified and color-corrected. The host leaned forward. "So, are you saying the Duke is emotionally disconnected from Meghan?" "I'm saying," Doran replied, "that what we're seeing there is a man suppressing something. Maybe not anger, but certainly fatigue, perhaps even resentment." It was the kind of quote producers love. Vague enough to intrigue, definitive enough to fuel headlines. Within hours, excerpts of the broadcast circulated online with captions like, "Expert confirms. Harry's body language shows contempt." The irony was bitter. The couple had attended a gala centered on mental health and emotional awareness, and yet their own body language was now being weaponized as entertainment. Experts who normally advocated empathy were dissecting their micro-expressions as if examining lab specimens. By evening, the conversation reached late-night commentary again. "Apparently, the psychologists are out in full force," joked one host. "At this rate, Harry's eye roll will be studied in universities." The audience laughed, but the prediction wasn't far off. Some psychology professors actually began using the clip in lectures about public behavior under stress. It became an academic case study. Authenticity versus performance, emotion under surveillance. Meanwhile, inside the Sussex team's media bubble, frustration mounted. Meghan's PR strategist, Miranda James, gathered her team in Los Angeles to discuss potential counters. "This is getting pathological," she said, voice sharp. "We have professors analyzing a human blink. We can't let this keep defining them." One assistant suggested arranging an interview with a sympathetic outlet to shift focus back to their charity work. Meghan hesitated. She had learned from experience that public interviews, no matter how carefully curated, always spiraled out of control once the clips hit social media. "If we talk about it," she said quietly, "we feed it. If we ignore it, they say we're hiding." Harry wasn't in the room for that meeting, but his position was already known. He had no interest in defending himself for being human. "They don't want the truth," he'd said earlier that morning. "They want performance. I'm not performing anymore." But even as he withdrew, others continued interpreting him. A viral YouTube channel run by two body language specialists released a 20-minute breakdown titled "The Truth Behind Prince Harry's Eye Roll: What Really Happened on Stage." It amassed over 2 million views within 24 hours. The hosts played the footage repeatedly, pausing at micro-moments. "Notice here," one said, drawing a circle around Harry's face. "His mouth compresses before the eye roll, that's suppression. He's holding something in." Her co-host added, "And after Meghan gestures toward..."